Welcome to worship this Christmas Eve. We have selected 3 special songs, and we're beginning with an African Noel. Remember, Christianity is a global religion. Just like Islam, these 2 major religions are in every country, in every place. And so at First-Plymouth, we make sure we bring in global sounds. This is a big faith, a big world. Listen to the African Noel. Noel, that's one of those great old-fashioned Christmas words. And Christmas time is filled with old words like Tannenbaum and wassail and nog and magi. Noel comes from the French, and it just means Christmas or a birth at Christmas. And we sing, of course, about the first Noel, the birth of Christ. Noel. What are some of your oldest memories of Christmas? Your first memories? Right now, I'm remembering being at my grandma's house as a kindergartner in Des Moines, Iowa. My grandmother was a music director at a church, and oddly enough, she owned her own full set of handbells for the family. And so she taught my dad and my two uncles to play handbells. And so on Christmas morning, the entire family, cousins, would gather at her house, and the three sons would play handbell carols to us. That one on the left is my dad with his two brothers. But I have another memory. I remember when my dad was preaching, he became a Methodist minister, and one late Christmas Eve at the 11 p.m. service, I was about second grade, and I was sitting in the balcony, and as my dad was preaching, I began to fall asleep. And I laid down in the pew, and I have this great Christmas memory of being half asleep, sort of hearing my dad's voice. I actually love it when I put people to sleep when I'm preaching, because to me that's such a calm, peaceful memory. I don't mind at all if someone just falls asleep as I preach, because that means church is a calm and loving place. Do you agree with me, Juan?
Well, what's fascinating is that when I think of Christmas and Noel, I think of my upbringing in Puerto Rico and how fun and party-like was like. Music was blaring, and even in the church there was a lot of rhythm, and there was a sense of joy. In some ways, thinking about songs like Silent Night didn't make any sense to me as a child, because Christmas or Navidad was not silent at all. It was full of fiesta and gathering together and music and loud and a sense in the air of energy. So that's my early memories of Christmas, are that energetic, joyful place where family gathered and danced together and heard music, all interspersed with this deep faith that no matter how difficult the year had been, it might just be better the coming year. That's my memory of Christmas.
I love the festivity of that and the difference between Des Moines, Iowa and Puerto Rico.
Right?
That's lovely. What are your memories of Christmas? And so now we go to another beautiful song. It Came Upon a Midnight Clear. Listen to this beautiful duet by Tom and Sam.
It came upon the midnight clear, that glorious song of old, from angels bending near the earth to touch their harps of gold. Peace on the earth, goodwill to all, from heaven's all gracious King. The world in solemn stillness lay to hear the angels sing. Yet with the wars of sin and strife, the world has suffered long. Beneath the heavy hymn that rolled 2,000 years of wrong, and we, entrenched at war, hear not the love song that they bring. Oh, hush the noise and end the strife, to hear the angels sing. prophets sing of old, when with the ever-circling years shall come the time foretold, when peace shall over all the earth, its ancient splendors fade, and the whole world gives back the song which now the angels sing, which now the angels sing.
I love that carol. And I think what I love about it is it's not just happy and merry and joyful. It has a slight melancholic tinge to it. You know, that song was written by Edmund Sears. He was a minister in Wayland, Massachusetts. That actually is just down the road from the church I served in Concord, Massachusetts. It was written in the early 1800s, and Edmund Sears suffered from depressions, but he had a deep faith. And I think somehow this song connects a deep faith and a hopefulness, but with a type of sadness. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, they actually have a concept to name that. They call it bright sadness. But I think there's a natural combination of feeling sad and yet also some hope, even joy. In our culture, we imagine those two emotions are completely separate. I'm not sure they are. I think at Christmas, a lot of us feel some types of sadness, but that can entwine itself with a sense of joy as well, a bright sadness.
It's fascinating too, because for me, when I think of midnight clear, I think of nighttime. And in Spanish, it's noche. And noche is not something bad. Noche is that which is obscure, that which is slightly hidden, that which we need to discover together. There's almost this romanticism about what happens in the evening at nighttime. And so I can imagine that melancholic feeling, but it's filled actually with possibility. It's filled with mystery. It is filled with hope. It might not be clear right now, but there's a curiosity there for me. And I think often at Christmas time, maybe because it's towards the end of the year, I too am filled with curiosity. The year has gone, the Christ has shown up once again, and I'm wondering, how is that Christ child going to be living in me now? Is there a newness that might emerge or a possibility? What kind of gifts am I going to be able to truly receive in this season? In the midst of so much need and struggle, what kind of gifts can I utilize differently? So that's what this triggers for me. It's reflection into the possibility of what this evening, this night, this noche, this midnight clear might just bring.
Boy, that is the essence of Christmas. Can we give birth to that Christ light within us? Can we be the light to the world? And now we turn to one of the most beloved Christmas carols. It's actually more about what we call Epiphany in the Christian church, but we sing it at Christmas, and you know it well. We Three Kings.
You know, Jim, in Puerto Rico, in Latin America, Epiphany is the primary Christmas celebration. And so I remember growing up as a child, and Christmas Day, the gifts were mostly clothes and very practical things, but the toys and the really good stuff came at Epiphany. And we would leave grass for the three kings and water for the camels. And we would leave them these gifts, and then they would leave you gifts by your bed. And I remember seeing those gifts. It was a great reminder of these wise men who came long ago to bring these gifts to the Christ child. And again, I asked myself the question, what does this Christ child do in my own life? What gifts does this Christ child bring to me to this day as a grown-up, no longer leaving grass and water for camels? What kind of gifts do these wise men bring? The other thing that I think about is this star that these wise men followed. And am I missing the guiding star in my life towards light and hope and joy and compassion and peace? Am I missing something? Am I paying attention? And so in this season, I'm hopeful that we pay attention. We have gifts to give to one another and to the world. We have a Christ who still shines a star for us to follow. And hopefully, if I pay attention and if we pay attention together, we might be a better humanity, a more loving, compassionate, and just humanity. Wise indeed to this day. Does that make any sense?
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. It's interesting to me, you naturally went from we three kings to calling them the wise men. How did they become kings in this carol we just heard? Actually, nobody knows exactly how that notion developed, but it developed really early. In the 2nd century, the church fathers started to talk about the three kings. Now, Scripture says the Magi, which are court astrologers or wise men, advisors. But then very early in the church, they became kings, probably because Isaiah 60 and a psalm talk about kings bowing down to the king. And so it's a wonderful act of the imagination to turn these magi into kings, a faithful imagination. I mean, what an image. Kings bowing down, worldly authorities, power, coercive power, bowing down to the King of Peace. I love that they became we three kings, and I love that Christmas is a time of faithful imagination. I mean, we have two birth stories, Luke and Matthew, and they're very different. And the kings are only in Matthew, and the shepherds are only in Luke. But then we merge it all together imaginatively into a nativity scene with shepherds and kings and Joseph and Mary and a manger. Manger is only in Luke, it's not in Matthew. But I love Christmas as an act of imagination. You know, Christmas almost didn't happen. It almost didn't happen in Scripture. Paul, those are the first writings in our gospel. Paul's letters are being written in the 50s. He makes no mention of the birth of Christ, none at all. The very first gospel written was Mark. It makes no mention of a birth story. Jesus appears as an adult. The Gospel of John only mentions the Word became flesh. That's the whole Christmas story. Then it's an adult Jesus that appears. It's only Luke and Matthew that give this birth story, but then, in an act of faithful imagination, Christians through all the ages have taken those stories, merged them together, but more importantly, brought them into our heart. We have much we need to give birth to. More peace, more love, more hope. This has been a different type of worship today. Instead of a full sermon, I was afraid a sermon might put someone to sleep. Not just a sermon, we took some beautiful Christmas music, just shared some thoughts. But what I hope is it has animated in you some deeper sense of this season. Merry Christmas.
May God fill you with peace and joy and love and imagination and new life. May the star guide all of us into a more just world. Merry Christmas.